Hey, Mike, here we are at part 3. We just went through part 1, why the flood, and then we talked about Noah's Ark, and part 3 today is how the flood.
Yeah, this is a good one. This is my favorite one.
This is a cool thing.
Yeah.
This is going to be exciting.
Yeah. We're going to take a little bit of license because we're going to speculate a little on some of these things. But there's good facts in here, and then we're also going to speculate some.
Right.
So we'll put it all together, and you'll see what you think. So,
right. Well,
like
sorry.
Well, like we always say, we're not trying to sell a view to anybody.
Yeah.
We just like to give you the information, have fun with it, and do your own homework and see what you think, what way you want to believe with all this stuff. So we'll throw it out there, and then you can make your minds up. But
right on.
Okay.
Well, what's the first thing here on the list?
Every major culture in the world has a legend of the flood.
Right.
So it's a real popular thing. We just read an Indian legend in the last segment. There's a lot of stuff about that. There was a recent Hollywood movie on the whole thing.
Yeah.
You remember. And Hollywood is Hollywood. It's not all that accurate with stuff, but if you want entertainment, you can go see it. But some people say, it was really good. Some people say it was terrible.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me.
Well, we've seen all kinds of stuff on the flood in the past. I mean, Noah's Ark and, so many things. It's out there all over the place. And
we went over the Sunday school version of the flood, which most people know, some type of version of the Sunday school thing. Right. But what is interesting is there's a lot of Christians that actually believe that the flood of Noah is an allegory. Mm-hmm. And it might not be an actual thing. And I think the reason for that is because it's hard to wrap your mind around some of these big ideas like a flood. Yeah. Because a flood is impossible. Yeah. How can the entire world flood, right? Yeah. That's impossible. So, some people think, well, it must be an allegory. And so it just means, how you're supposed to live your life or whatever, but it doesn't actually talking about a flood.
Right.
It is, in fact, however, talking about a flood. The other thing is, a lot of people think that the flood was a regional flood and not a worldwide flood. And I think also the reason for that is because, for the same reason, it's hard to wrap your mind around, the entire world flooding at the same time, because that's impossible.
Well, yeah, just in our day.
In our day, that's right.
We don't have that much water even.
Right, but in a regional sense, you say, well, that makes good sense, so it must be regional. But the Bible is fairly clear that it was worldwide, and as we'll see in a minute, the evidence shows that it was worldwide also. Mm-hmm. It, in fact, was worldwide. But we have some indisputable facts, like for the example that one time the entire earth was covered in water. This is an indisputable fact. We have clamshells on mountaintops and all kinds of manner of fossils and fish fossils and all this. Everybody knows that the earth was at one time covered in water.
Right.
Also, we said already that there was a lot of people that may have lived at the time, millions, even as many as 1 billion or 2. That's a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So when this flood came about, that was a catastrophe, huge proportions.
Right.
So there's 2 questions. Why did the flood happen, and how did the flood happen? Or you could say more easy for you to say, how could the flood have possibly happened? Right? A lot of people say that. Skeptics say that the ark wasn't possibly even close to big enough to carry the animals. How could you get them all in there? People say it's impossible to rain 40 days and 40 nights everywhere in the world at the same time.
Right.
Therefore, the story is a fable. And it's impossible. There's no way that could have happened. There's 2 big mistakes that are made as of this.
Big ones.
Yeah. One of them is not understanding the power of God or the Word of God. This would fall to the non-Christian category, but also some Christians too. That's a big mistake. They just think that it just couldn't happen, so therefore it couldn't happen. And you're just discounting God entirely from a miracle or what have you. The other mistake is assuming that the world is exactly the same now as it was then. This is a big mistake because the world then was entirely different than it was now, and we can even show how that is.
Right.
First off, we know that there was a lot of water. And we go down here to Genesis 1. Right in Genesis 1. It says, the earth was without form. This is right when God was making the place in the first place. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Okay, so there was a lot of water. Now, in Genesis 1, 6 and 7 is our first big clue. It says, and God said, let there be a firmament in the waters, in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the water from the water. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And God made a firmament and divided the water which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. So there's water above and water below. We got water below. Because the firmament, you can say, okay, that's our atmosphere, the sky, the air we breathe. That's the firmament. The water below is lakes, rivers, seas, and everything. That's the water below. And we got water above. But we don't have water above, except in the case of in the atmosphere. It's in the air we breathe right now. There's a certain amount of humidity there, right? But not water above. But there may have been, previously, there may have been water above. This is known as the water canopy theory. And what that says is that there was a vast amount of water vapor in the air, or even maybe just above the air, around the entire world, a vast water canopy. This would have been one of the reasons why the people lived so long back in the day before the flood, because it would have blocked out some of the harmful UV rays and other things, and that would have been one factor in that. It's also possible that there was no such thing as rain before the flood.
It's interesting.
Or snow. Or big storms. And none of that stuff. It may be that none of that stuff was around at that time. And we got some evidence for that. If we go to Genesis 2, verse 5. It says, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth, and watered the whole face of the ground. It sounds like an entire geological system.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Where mist watered everything. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Get that out of the way.
I hope you're on the right page.
I hope so too. I'll never find it again.
Okay.
The other theory, besides the water canopy theory, is the hydroplate theory. Now, have you heard about this?
Not really, no.
This
might be a new one to me.
Okay. The hydroplate theory is that there was a great amount of water pressure and a great amount of water under the ground. Mm-hmm. Good far distance under the ground. Real high water pressure. And that this cracked open. And when it cracked open, you had great fountains and bursts of water coming up from the ground. And that it was so much pressure and there was so much water that it literally moved continents, and it literally caused mountains to come up out of the ground. And we get a little bit of this in Genesis 7. And it says, on that day, all the fountains of the deep were broken up. Mm-hmm. Remember, it says you have rain coming down, but also it tells us that the fountains of the deep were loosed, right?
Right.
So this is where you get this hydroplate theory. And some people think it's one or the other, and some people think it may be both of them in conjunction, which is what I believe.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
So what do we have on the earth at that time? We have no rain. Everything gets this mist, this watered up from this mist. You have this water canopy all the way around the world. And you have atmospheric pressure that they estimate to be double what it is now. As a matter of fact, some people say that they've done studies on these things, that the pterodactyl, the dinosaur bird, couldn't not even fly in the atmosphere that we have now. Because it's just not thick enough for lack of a better term.
Right.
But at that time it would have been if the atmosphere was double the pressure that it is today. There was not present the conditions for a rainbow. Mm-hmm. Remember, rainbows didn't come about until after the flood.
Right.
And so you didn't even have the conditions for the rainbow. So that's what you have, partly what's going on. Also, what you have, and this is not a speculation, this part, the entire earth was tropical. And you say, what do you mean the entire Earth was tropical? Well, we have all around the Earth tropical plants that have been found, or seeds from tropical plants, pollens from tropical plants, in all around the U.S. and all around the world. I mean everywhere. You have tropical remains of tropical plants buried deep down in the ground everywhere. Yeah. So you know that, and this is not only the United States, but I'm talking about the entire world. So we know that sometime in Earth's ancient past, the entire world was tropical. Now that's fascinating.
That is pretty awesome.
And I love this because I don't like it cold. It's kind of cold here in the Secret Studios.
Yeah.
And I don't like it cold. I like it hot.
Yeah.
I like it tropical. Right? I always say that. I like it tropical. Well, it looks as though the Lord designed us to be tropical.
Right.
And not freezing in the snow like we do. Anyway.
We wouldn't last long without jackets.
That's for sure. Yeah. So these fossils and pollens are found all around the world. Now, the other interesting thing is Antarctica. Now, you think of Antarctica, you know it's covered in 2 miles of ice. Both poles are.
Yeah.
It turns out that they have went up there. You can show this first photo. And there's the expedition, one of the expedition ships right there. They went up there and they dug way down in this ice and along the coastline and everything, and they found tropical plants and tropical seeds of vast amounts of this stuff all over the place. So that even on the poles, both poles, was tropical. No ice, tropical. All around on both poles, all around the entire world. Now go ahead and bring up some of those other photos if you got them. So they drilled 1,000 meters below the ocean shore, and you found this stuff. Like this here's a palm tree, I think. Palm tree seed is what that is. This is the kind of thing that you see there. You'll see some of these things and these other things.
And that was in one of the things that these guys brought up.
That's right.
In this drilling.
Yeah, in the drilling.
Yeah.
Here you have a plate. I don't know if this is from the same drilling, but this is a plate with some tropical plants on it.
Uh-huh.
And so you had tropical and subtropical plants and trees coming up from this expedition, and also all around the whole world.
Right. And there's another one here.
Yeah, this is a tree with some growth rings on it to show that it, at certain times in its life, it was very tropical, tropical climate. This is from a tree that is in the ice. We're just frozen all the time.
Right.
But in its past, it was tropical.
And here's that other thing that was.
This is some of the samples that came up from the expedition on the ship. They drill and they come up with these tubes and they open up and they got all these samples, and they can search these samples and they can find all the stuff under the microscope.
That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool
and we get these things.
And we get these things, and this is how we know that the entire Earth was tropical.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating. A lot of people don't know that the entire Earth was at one time tropical. And I suspect that the time that it was tropical was the pre-flood time.
Yep. That
is when it was tropical. Now, the Earth, as it currently sits, is 23.5 degrees to the left. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that it's off its axis, right? Yeah. It's tilted. The Earth is tilted.
Right.
23.5 degrees. This is where we get our 4 seasons. And if the Earth was not tilted in the way it is now, we wouldn't get 4 seasons. As a matter of fact, it would be tropical.
Mm-hmm.
Tropical and subtropical, the entire planet. So way up at the poles, it would be like warm and hot. And then down at the equator, it'd be hot, mostly hot. And then it'd be warm and hot again, right? That's kind of how it all worked.
No ice.
And there wouldn't have been any ice. No, any ice at all. It is possible that the Earth was at one time not 23.5 degrees off its axis, and we're going to build on this as we go along here.
Okay.
So
we got that picture up if you want to show it.
Oh yeah, let's take a look. Here's the Earth there with its tilt, and the arrow showing which way the Earth spins, and it's tilted. Now, if you move that thing right straight up and down, that would change the angle of the sun and the angle of the sun's orbit and all this stuff, and it would make it so that there was no ice anywhere.
Yeah.
Period. No ice. And the evidence shows that that's how it was. By the way, at one time there was no ice up there. and there was no ice down below on the South Pole, and there was no ice anywhere. It was all tropical. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So it's possible that the Earth, at the time of the flood, went from 23.5 straight up and down to 23.5 over. That's a possibility. That's a theory. It's a possibility. And now there's a few problems in science with scientists and evolutionists, particularly evolutionary scientists. They have a few problems with the Earth, with some of the things in the Earth that they can't explain. And one of the things is the Grand Canyon. They say that the Colorado River there over millennia carved the Grand Canyon out of there.
Yeah.
Even though it's a little trickle of a river, and all the other rivers in the world are still on the top of the ground for some reason, but that one dug it all the way. There's lots of problems with it.
It was there a long time, Mike.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
yeah. I hear it. It always blows me away too to think like that.
But that's a problem. If you're a scientist, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because how did that get there? And it got there quick.
Uh-huh.
But they can't explain it, so that's a problem for them. Another one is that there's no transitional species in the fossil record. In other words, a frog now, when you find fossils of frogs from thousands of years ago, they are still frogs.
Right.
The same thing with horses and dogs and cats and everything else. There's no transitions. So that's a big problem for them. Another problem is there's no missing link in the human record, right?
Right.
And so that's a problem for them. But besides those well-known problems, there are also some other problems.
Big ones.
Yeah.
You'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you guys don't know what he's talking about because he knows. Brian here knows what we're about to show.
Uh-huh.
Anyway.
Cool stuff.
So we got, maybe you guys have heard that there was found a frozen mammoth. A lot of people have heard this. And we got a picture of actually the frozen mammoth that was found. And it was found intact, frozen. Now here it is here. This was found in Siberia. And some of this has rotted away in this. Some of this is a model. And some of this is the fur. The fur there is all legitimate. And there's some other parts of flesh that are real. And some of it is just a model. Some of it is rotted away. But this mammoth was found like that. Frozen just like that. It had all its skin, its meat, its internal organs, even the fur on it, and you can see that it's like it's sitting down on its legs, but actually its legs are broken. It was standing, and something came down on it with such ferocity and such force and such suddenness that this animal's back legs were broken right in where it was standing. It just came down just like that. And frozen in place.
Wow.
Flash frozen in place. And as a matter of fact, it still had buttercups in its mouth.
Yeah.
It was eating buttercups because it was tropical up there, right? It wasn't frozen ice. You got mammoths and they got fur on them, and people think, well, they lived where it was real cold. But mammoths did not live in the cold.
No.
They just happened to have fur on them. It's like, a lot of things that live where it's hot that have fur all over. Same kind of thing. And so this mammoth is a big, big problem because this is impossible. You can't get a giant 4-ton animal frozen in a matter of seconds, perfectly in place, and then you can see it was standing when it was killed, and it still had its food in its stomach, and it still had the buttercups in its mouth. There's actually 12 species of mammoth.
Really?
Yeah, people just think there's the woolly mammoth, but there's also other mammoths. Some of them made up to 10, 15 tons. And they're all over the world, not just up there. There's mammoth specimens that we found all over the world. Their tusks were up to 15 feet long. And here's the big kicker that a lot of people don't know. There were a lot of these up there. Mm-hmm. When I say frozen mammoths, there were a lot of frozen mammoths, not just one flash frozen mammoth, but there were a lot of them. You want to bring up another picture, go ahead. Here's another one, some guys digging one up out of the hillside there, out of the tundra. Just exactly the way it was frozen thousands of years ago. That interesting?
That is cool.
Yeah, go on over to the next slide. There's another one that was frozen. You see his face is kind of dried up there a little bit and all that kind of thing, but you can see his fur there and all that. Frozen from the day it died. There's another one, a smaller one. Mm-hmm. Same thing. You have all its skin and everything. You can see its trunk there.
Did I show that one already?
No, you haven't shown this one yet. Here's another one. It's kind of in a little poor condition, but it's still fairly well intact, especially from being thousands of years old.
Yeah.
You can see it has a Russian writing there. A lot of these are found in Siberia and Alaska, but the best, most of the specimens and the best specimens are actually found in Siberia. Here's another baby one. There are actually, they estimate, 30 million mammoths.
Wow.
Up there that were killed at the same time in the same instant. Now, not all of them are specimens like this one here. A beautiful, frozen, intact specimen. Yeah. What? It's unbelievable, right? Yeah. Look at that. Thousands and thousands and thousands of them, and they say as many as 30 million.
Wow.
So this is a big problem. A lot of these were flash frozen within seconds. Mm-hmm. They say they say the Ice Age came on fairly quickly, and fairly quickly in science is like 10 years.
Yeah.
And they've even sped it all the way up to 1 year now. The Ice Age may even come on as fast as a year, but you do not get frozen. There's another one. Looks good. You do not get flash frozen in a year. You get flash frozen in a matter of seconds.
Right.
The other big thing about these mammoths is many of them were suffocated. They died from suffocation. Right? They couldn't breathe.
Right.
And we know this because we can dissect them. Look how good these pictures are.
Yeah. It's amazing to me.
Besides these, there were also millions of other animals that are in the same state as these you see here. Most of these are just bones, though. These are rarer specimens that you have a full body, Mostly you just get bones.
Right.
But there are some specimens like this, but the millions and millions are mostly just bones. But amongst these bones there's rhinoceroses, there's hyenas up there in the Antarctica.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Saber-toothed tiger, which is a prehistoric animal that is no longer around. Buffaloes bones are in there. There's a hoof of one of these mammoths.
That's cool.
Isn't that cool?
Just amazing.
They found leopards, many more animals.
Wow.
And they were all living in a tropical climate. Mm-hmm. They have found piles of bones, 200 to 500 feet deep, of just bones and trees and shrubs and animals of various sorts, all picked up and thrown down in a big pile.
Right.
Hundreds of feet deep.
Yeah.
This is a big problem, because how did that happen?
Yeah, you don't just randomly stack 500, possibly 500 feet worth of bones.
Yep.
And animals and
no, they just were walking along, and then no, these all died at the same time. As a matter of fact, they all died in the same instant.
Yeah.
Something happened that was so unbelievable.
Right.
It killed millions of animals in the very same instant. Wow. Mm-hmm. And this is a problem for science, because how did that happen? Mm-hmm. Nobody knows. It's impossible to have frozen mammoth. That's impossible. Yeah. You can't have a frozen mammoth, because if something dies, it decays. Mm-hmm. It doesn't get frozen in a spot. Something weird happened that they can't explain. But we're going to take a stab at it, because we got a pretty good idea what's going on here.
Cool. Now,
the Ice Age. The whole idea of an ice, we all heard of the Ice Age. We've all seen the cute little movies and all the stuff.
Right.
And everybody's heard about the Ice Age. Well, the very first time the Ice Age was even mentioned or even thought of was 1837.
Is that right?
That's right. And in the Ice Age, we have a lot of evidence of the Ice Age. There actually was an Ice Age. And during this time, 1/3 of the Earth was covered in ice and snow. Not all of the Earth. There were vast areas with no ice or snow, but 1/3 of it was covered in ice and snow. Now, scientists estimate there were somewhere between 1 all the way up to 30 ice ages. And they make these goofy estimates that every 30,000 years you get an ice age, this kind of thing. But there's no agreement on how the Ice Age started or could have ever started. There's no agreement on how long the Ice Age lasted. And there's no agreement on how many Ice Ages there were. Mm-hmm. What that means is they're guessing. They don't know. They're just throwing it out there.
Right.
They just know that one of them, the only one we know is that for sure there was one. That's for sure. The rest of it is all speculation. Mm-hmm. The guys, they want to get it written up in journals or whatever.
Right.
They're speculations. But So they say, well, we got these frozen animals, so they must have come on quickly. So you got these flash frozen animals. How did this happen? What's going on? Now we get some clues. Now we're going to go biblical here. We're going to get some clues. So we're going to go to Genesis 7. And here it says, talking to Noah, "For after 7 more days I will cause it to rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And I will destroy from the face of the earth all living things I have made. And Noah did according to all the Lord commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters were on the earth. So Noah, with his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives, went into the ark because of the waters of the flood. Of clean animals, of animals that are unclean, of birds, and of everything that creeps on the earth, 2 by 2 they went into the ark to Noah, male and female, as God commanded Noah. And it came to pass, after 7 days, that the waters of the flood were on the earth." Have you ever wondered why it is Noah and his family and all the animals were on the ark 7 days before it even started to rain?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why is that?
There's a reason.
Yeah.
We got to find out why is that reason. I mean, why didn't he go in the day before? Was 2 days before, and 2 hours before. Right.
Okay, it's coming. Let's get in the,
7 days.
Yeah.
Well, we had, I believe the reason that they were put in the ark 7 days previous is because whatever caused the flood had to happen before the flood, right? We get this idea that Noah looked out the window and it started getting dark out there, and it looks like the rain's coming. Everybody in the boat,
right.
in the boat. It's getting rain. It looks like it's going to rain, and so it started to rain. This is the idea you get. But what we had was a cataclysmic extinction event that was so big it killed everything in the entire world, right?
Yeah.
This was a huge, unbelievable thing. And what we get in the Bible is, it rained and all that stuff. But you don't get the whole picture. You don't need the whole picture. That is plenty enough. But we got evidences to kind of put together the picture.
Right.
So that's what we're going to do. So in Genesis 7, it says, "In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened."
Yeah.
Okay? So, we talked about the hydroplate theory. That there was vast amounts of water in the earth, under high pressure. And the Lord says here in Genesis 7 that the fountains of the deep were broken up on that day. And it let loose. And the windows of heaven were opened. So that canopy came down in the form of rain. It may have been a canopy. It may have been similar to water in the atmosphere that we have now. There's water even that we're breathing right now in the air here, in small amounts of humidity. But up there, it may have been much thicker and obviously a vast amount of water, enough that it could rain all around the entire world at the same time for 40 days. That's a lot of rain. It has to come from somewhere. Right now, that's impossible. This is where you get this canopy theory.
Right.
How could it rain for 40 days? If you had a canopy, it could rain for 40 days. And we got evidences which we went through already where it didn't even rain in those days.
Right.
But the mist came up from the ground. It was a different ecological system entirely. So you had 2 huge things, the Bible says, happened at the same time. Now we're going to try to figure out how could that have been. So we're going to do a little speculating here now.
Okay.
But follow me along with this because this makes good sense,
Yeah, it does.
and we'll learn a lot as we go. Show this next picture. When this comes up here, we have a giant hole in the ground. This is in Winslow, Arizona. And this is an asteroid that struck a long, long time ago in Winslow, Arizona. This asteroid is a mile across and 500 feet deep. Sometime in Earth's ancient past history, that happened. It's a mile across. I've been there. You go stand there on the rim of that thing, and it's real impressive.
Yeah, I bet it's awesome.
You can see where you can't even see. They got binoculars that you can put the quarter in, and look down.
Yeah.
And you can look down to the middle. There's a little building even down there in the middle.
Yeah.
Where they do research and stuff, and you can't even see it. Even when you're standing there, you can't see it.
It's a mile.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Now,
cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, the next one slide we're going to show is of the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, a lot of people have heard about the theory that the dinosaurs, what happened to the dinosaurs, right? They just up and disappeared one point in history. And so the theory is there was some kind of a major extinction event. And maybe an asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula, and that's what killed the dinosaurs. Now, what you have here is an artist's rendition of the Yucatan Peninsula, because on the real satellite view, you can't see the ring now because it's all overgrown with, and part of it's underwater, and the other part is overgrown. You can't see it, so you just be looking at a boring satellite photo. So you got the area showing where it hit there.
Yeah.
And I didn't write this down, I don't think. I forget how wide this thing was. Oh, it's 110 miles. I did write it down. It's 110 miles wide. Now, remember, the Winslow, Arizona one is a mile wide.
Yeah.
This is 110 miles wide.
Yeah. Jeez.
Now, there's even one bigger than this one. And this is the Redefort asteroid strike. This is in South Africa. If you can bring this up. There's what we get. You can kind of see the leading edge there going up out sort of the top there in the middle of the photo, kind of going in the circular ring.
Gives you the idea how big it is.
You can see how big this is.
Shape.
It's 180 miles across.
Yeah, wow.
180 miles across. So that is so huge you can't even believe it. So in Earth's ancient past, you had asteroid strikes. There's a lot more than just these, by the way. You had asteroid strikes hitting the Earth that were so big and so unbelievable that it could possibly even be an Earth extinction event. Just like the goofy thing they say about the dinosaurs from that one, the Yucatan, right? This is a possibility. So here's how the theory basically goes. It may be that in the time, the Earth was not 23.5 degrees off axis, but it was straight, and the whole world was tropical. That information we already know, that the whole Earth was tropical. So the Earth was that way. Then the Lord said, Noah, get in the ark because the asteroid is coming. It doesn't say that in the word, and we don't know if that's the case. But I'm saying this is the possibility. You could have had 2 asteroids. You could have had 3. You could have had 5. You could have all of these hitting at the same time for all we know. But suppose you had an asteroid strike of immense proportions like what we just saw there. And it actually hit with such force that it pushed the Earth 23.5 degrees off its axis, right? That's pretty massive. And that's just the kind of thing that would do it. That kind of
180
mile thing. And when that struck, that caused that super high pressure below the ground to burst out of its place. Some estimates are that you could have had, when the Bible says that the fountains of the deep were let loose, that you could have had fountains shooting into the sky maybe 10 miles high, maybe all the way to the edge of the atmosphere, shooting up all around the Earth, all over at the same time, shooting up hundreds of feet in the air. This is speculation, or you could have had it coming a little less than that, or whatever. There was a lot of water coming up from the ground. That we know for sure. That is biblical. It doesn't matter how high and how much, that you don't know, but it was a lot, and it came out. And some speculate that this is where we got our continent shifts and our movements around at that time. Some of our mountain ranges and so forth weren't there yet, and they think that would have been at the time. We got mountain ranges in the ocean, way down below the water. Some of them, the highest mountains in the world, are below the water, right? Even higher than Everest. Below the water. Weird, huh? And so some people say, theorize, that those were created at this time. At the same time, that's all happening at the same time. At the same time that happened, this water canopy around the world collapsed in. And it's all started coming down in the form of rain. It forms into water droplets, and it all came down in the form of rain. The kind of rain, by the way, which you could only dream of. It wouldn't be like rain like we know now, right? This would be coming down. Talk about raining cats and dogs, right?
Yeah.
This would have been coming down in the kind of amounts that no one has even heard of before.
Right.
With just in the huge amounts of drenching amounts of
rain is an understatement.
Right, an understatement. So you got that coming down for 40 days, and you also have, by the way, those fountains of the deep flowing for 40 days. They were blowing out of there for 40 days also. So I was going to bring in a CO2 canister, and I forgot it. Now, CO2 is what they make dry ice out of. Frozen CO2 gas is dry ice. And if you have these little CO2 canisters, you can use them for all kinds of stuff, shooting paintballs and all this kind of stuff. You got CO2 canisters, right?
Right.
Well, when you shoot it off, it gets real cold. And it gets cold because you have pressurized CO2 being releasing quickly and from the pressure situation, changing its flow.
Right.
And this causes it to freeze rapidly. And so that's why the dry ice canister is frozen. So the theory is that when the asteroid struck, the Earth was tilted off its axis, that the canopy rained down, that the fountains of the deep went up. And when that canopy broke loose, you had something similar to a CO2 cartridge, a real big one. A CO2 cartridge going off, right? Yeah. You had air changing. And they estimate at this ancient time that the atmosphere may have been 6 or 7 or 8 times the carbon dioxide levels that they are today. Carbon dioxide, like I said, is what you make dry ice out of. It gets real, real cold. 111 degrees below zero, I think it is, or 109, something like that. And so the theory is that on both poles, you had this massive, right? Mm-hmm. When it broke loose. And so what happened is it made hundreds of thousands of tons of ice, instantly frozen ice and rock and dry ice all at the same time, and piled up these mammoths, hundreds of feet of all mammoth, everything, all at one time. You would have had this huge, right?
Right.
Scooping up millions of animals at one time and sucking them right up in the and throwing them down into a pile. Because not only, the tundra is made up of trees and grass and all this other, they call it muck is what the term they call it, muck. Because it's just a mixture of things.
Right.
And you may have had tons of dry ice falling from the sky. Now, a lot of these mammoths we have seen from the tests we've done on them were suffocated. Yeah. Right? And so you would have thousands or maybe millions of animals all killed instantly in a moment in time. Millions of animals flash frozen, if that theory was true. Mm-hmm. And so when you put this all together, you have a view of what maybe happened at the time of the flood. The flood was a big deal.
Yeah.
It's not just a Sunday school story. It was a really big deal. So it's fascinating. It's fun to think about. It's a possibility. It's nothing we want to get uptight over or anything, but it's neat to talk about. And what it does is it makes your Bible come alive.
Yeah.
And that's what you really want. Yeah. You want the Bible to come alive. What the Bible says is true. It's absolutely true. And we have reasons to believe that. We have all kinds of evidences everywhere that these kind of things is exactly the way the Lord said it happened. That's what
from something like this.
From something like that. That's right.
Amazing.
When they say the dinosaur,
can you imagine that hitting the earth, what it would do?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Even it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination. That would be just crazy.
Even when the earth moves underneath us, sometimes 100, 200 miles away, you feel the earthquake.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes
miles away.
Right. And it's just a little bit of the earth moving. Now imagine something coming in at 1,000,000 miles an hour, 180 miles wide, and smashes into.
Yeah.
Well, the asteroid wouldn't have been 180 miles wide. It made the hole, but 180. But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It may have been 20 miles wide or 50 miles. Who knows? But coming in at 1,000,000 miles an hour, that's going to shake some things up real bad in a hurry.
It explains things like the mammoths.
Right.
How do you get that?
Exactly right.
One way to get that.
That's exactly right.
With the buttercups frozen.
They were flash frozen.
Legs.
Instantly.
Stacked 200 feet deep.
Yeah. And when they say that
amazing,
the dinosaurs may have been extinct because of an asteroid strike in the Yucatan Peninsula, they might be right.
Yeah.
Only there was much more to the story than just the dinosaurs, because the evolutionist faction want to make the dinosaurs way older than everything else.
Right.
But here we particularly believe that the dinosaurs were at the same time. At least they were around at the time of Noah, and they may have been part of the seed problem in the time of Noah may have been, the dinosaurs may have been in that too.
We're going to do a show on that.
We're doing a show on that. I think the next show will be, in fact, the dinosaur show. Cool. And dinosaurs, those are fun because everybody loves dinosaurs.
Yes, right.
Even though they might have been evil creatures.
Yeah. Right.
Still, everybody loves dinosaurs. And
cool, man.
So next time we'll do that. And we'll talk about that.
This is cool stuff. Thanks, Mike.
It sure is.
Right on.
See you next time.
All right.